annual budget of the government is not only a document or the statement which balances the government revenue and expenditure. It is necessarily a long-term government policy document which will promote the exports, direct investments, and also the growth, inequality, and also the standard living of the people. Prime Minister and the government have issued a long-term vision statement how this country can take forward targeting towards creating 1 million employment and also increasing the per capita incomes. There are several measures were announced, but we expect from this budget that Honorable Finance Minister will incorporate all this long-term mission and vision statement and turn into a plan that can be implemented successfully within next year and within next 2-3 years. That's what we expect from the budget.
And good morning. This is Newsline, live from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. And joining us this morning on the day after we have the results of the United States presidential election is Mr. Mohammed Zuhail, academic and former ambassador to the state of Kuwait. Good morning, Mr. Zuhail. And we are also delighted to have back on our program Professor Rajiva Vijayasinghe. Good morning to you,
morning,
Professor. And thank you again for being
as
on
always.
Newsline, gentlemen. Mr. Zuhail, Donald Trump's campaign was, everybody agrees, has been extremely full of palpitations. What is the impact will he have on the Middle East, for example? You know, in light of the statements he said that he wishes to ban all Muslims from entering the United States.
Well, Donald Trump is a newcomer to politics, newcomer to public life. So he's canvassing his propaganda work. I don't know how much he can implement when it comes to real working.
Right.
So if he wants to do some of those things, what he had said, especially what, as you said, about the Middle East and Muslim community,
Yeah.
Muslim Arab countries especially have substantially large investment in the United States, treasury bonds and various direct investment and so on. If they are hurt, if they threaten to withdraw all that or some of that, that can have a drastic effect on the American economy, you see. And that will have, don't forget, Islamic world, OIC members, about 58 countries. 20% of the population are Muslim world. So if you want to ban all of them or prevent all of them coming off screen, as he said, that's going to be a major difficult task for American administration.
But surely they screen them as it is anyway.
As it is, they screen everybody. I mean, even if you and I go, they screen.
Yeah.
So that's no problem. That is standard. But if he says that I am going to strictly screen, ban, and so on, as he had been vocal at the election campaign, that can have a major impact on the American economy, American population, people.
So do you feel then that by and large the campaign rhetoric will be forgotten when he assumes office?
Either forgotten or he will tone it down, because it will be difficult to implement such things. Not only about Muslims, he was talking about the blacks, African Americans and Hispanics and all other communities. It's a minority, basically all minorities. So I don't think in any country, especially in a developed Western country, it's so easy to implement that kind of policies, bring it as a policy of the government. Political meeting, yes. I don't know how he was able to, win with all that kind of things, but he has done that, It's a white supremacy election. That's what it is. I mean, non-college educated, majority white voters, I suppose, maybe gave him the victory.
But isn't it amazing, Professor Vijayasinghe, that a completely non-political person who's never held any form of public office has managed to end up as possibly the world's most powerful man.
Well, it is strange, but I think it's high time, because I think for a very, very long time indeed, what
Do you
I
think
would
it can be
call
replicated in another country?
Well, I think it was replicated in Peru when Fujimori won. It's not entirely surprising. Sometimes people get in a total outsider to lead their parties, as happened in Sri Lanka with Mrs. Bandaranaike. So I don't think it's absolutely unprecedented. But I think it's very important at this stage because it sends a very clear message that people are tired of an increasingly self-centered establishment. I think one of the most remarkable factors about the American election was that while Trump did very well in most states in the country, what I would call the establishment that has governed America in every sense for the last few years was emphatically behind Clinton. Washington, D.C. voted 92% for her, and he got 4%. Now that is a stunning indictment on the people who have been governing America. They have been ignoring the interests of the people. Now they will probably think these are stunning indictment on the voters. You know, it's like that wonderful line in Brecht, you know, the people have voted against the government, let's change the people. So I think the establishment will keep going on and on about it, just as is happening in Britain, when there was such a reaction to the juggernaut, as my former dean described it, that was just doing what it liked. So I think this is actually a good thing for democracy. It's also a very good thing for Sri Lanka, because Hillary Clinton has lied and lied again about Sri Lanka. She persecuted us. You know well that Mr. Sivajalingam, who is probably one of the more extreme members of the TNA, was dashing coconuts around the place.
1008.
Well, God knows why it was 1008,
and
but maybe the
gods
wanted 1010, and when they didn't get it, I'm afraid she lost.
Okay.
So I don't think we need to feel very sorry about that. But you remember her allegation that the Sri Lankan military used rape as a weapon of war. And when they realized it was a complete fabrication, they didn't have the grace to apologize. She's a very wicked woman. I called her a couple of months ago the Wicked Witch of the West. She's obsessed with money, as we know from the foundation.
Did you work on the Trump campaign?
No, I didn't work on the Trump campaign because I don't know, but I think he was certainly a great advantage. And I think, you remember that in 2009, when America turned against us, one of my staff, when I was head of the Peace Secretariat, asked Bob Blake why he had turned against us, and he had simply said, I was told, I work for a different government. So I do hope that the Republicans are more pragmatic. If I might just take up the questions you asked Mr. Zuhail, I think there's a big difference between campaign rhetoric and the underlying meaning.
Yeah.
I don't think Trump was anti-Muslim or anti-Hispanic.
I'm positive now that you worked on his campaign.
Right, but what he said, I think, was addressing two deep concerns. One is illegal immigration.
Right.
I think it's legitimate to see that as a concern. But the second, I think, was Islamic extremism.
Yeah.
And I think the tragedy of the Clinton years as foreign secretary was getting rid of moderate Muslims. They tried to get rid of Mr. Assad. You know, thank heavens that the Russians and the Iranians did not allow this monstrosity to happen. They got rid of Libya, and the way she reacted to Libya's death, which she precipitated.
Right.
You know, the nasties were given information by the Americans about where he was. When he was killed in the most brutal way possible, she tittered, and that sort of behavior is outrageous. And all this leads to support for Islamic extremism. And I think the fact that Trump seemed to be anti-Islamic was because he didn't want terrorism. But I do hope that he will now recognize the importance of moderate Muslim leaders like Mr. Assad and indeed like the Iranians, because to me a litmus test of any regime is the way they treat women. Iran, Syria and Libya did a lot for women, and they were the victims of American extremism.
Let me just move on a little bit. Mr. Joel, how possible do you think it is that in Sri Lanka the people may well choose a president from other than the existing political sphere?
Well, You are
How
relating to Trump.
possible?
Yeah.
Yes, Trump,
Yes.
rank complete outsider, head of the United States.
Yes. Yes. Do you see any personalities, possible personalities?
I'm asking you.
I'm telling
Yes.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
what. Trump, though he was not a politician, he was a very, very successful businessman. At least he had success. He had his tentacles all over the world in America. He was a very, very prominent person. So we need that kind of possible some individual to collect all
There are
these
plenty
support.
of business people in this
Business
country.
people we do have, but
who-
do they have public commitment is the question, you see. You need a commitment for public, How many of them get into public affairs? Maybe some of these one or two individuals who, I don't know whether you want to mention names, built up some big NGOs who had grassroots level some support. But
So what about, there are lots, I don't want to mention names,
Yes.
but there are in this country a lot of businessmen who have made it and who employ people by the thousands, tens of thousands,
Yes.
and by our standards, and some of them are wealthy internationally, by international standards.
yes. But in Sri Lanka, if you look at, you need the grassroots level support for election win. Not only the corporate sector, not only the urban population. Bulk of the population is rural in this country. Bulk of the population are linked or aligned to one or two parties, political parties. Breaking through that, you need huge effort, huge media support and finance. Of course, there is a possibility. There may be one person can come, but we have, as it is, people.
So we
focus
may be
towards
light years away. But what about this then, Professor? The vote in the United States, it appears that it is a vote against the politicians, because it's complete novice when it comes to public office. The people have chosen somebody with zero experience. But as Mr. Joel says, and as the world knows, Mr. Trump is a great businessman. He's had so many comebacks. And so doesn't that indicate something, that even the people in Sri Lanka might well do this, because they too appear to be getting fed up of non-delivery, under-delivery, non-delivery of promises and so on in the country?
Well, I think you have to look at it in terms of very often when an establishment or an existing structure fails, people look to a new face. But I think within the structure of Sri Lankan politics, there are opportunities for new faces to emerge within the political structure. I think Maithripala Sirisena was a refreshing change from what had gone before, just as Mahinda Rajapaksa was an extremely refreshing change from what had gone before. And if you remember the way S.W. Bandaranaike emerged against the assumptions of the establishment.
Yeah.
So I think there are conduits for change here, and Donald Trump was simply a conduit for change in the States in what is very much a sort of static political system.
Yeah.
Most of their legislators get re-elected. There's very little change every year. You get the occasional upset in the Senate and so on. But I think what's remarkable about him is that he shouldn't be seen as only a businessman, because he's been a businessman who's been against what has been represented as the biggest strength of America, which is the corporates and the banks. You see, if you look at the way the last regime behaved, or indeed the previous one, they bailed out the banks. There was lots of the profits being made by these guys. And whom do they make the profits of? It's a bit like Arjuna Mahendran and Ranil Wickramasinghe and Arjuna Aloysius. Those profits are made at the expense of the people. But most media, which is also controlled by this establishment,
We better clarify what you
highlight
just said,
this.
lest we wake somebody up. But when you mean public money, obviously you're meaning the purchases made by EPF and ETF and other captive state
No, I mean the
organizations.
very fact that the Sri Lankan state had to pay massive interest because of the chicanery of the Prime Minister and Arjuna Mahendran.
Yeah.
Of course, people say the Prime Minister told him to go direct. But if that was the case, and if Arjuna Mahendran did not follow what...
Not only the people, Rajiv, the Prime Minister himself in Parliament on the 17th of March.
No, I agree with that.
He put his hands behind these things and he said, I instructed.
Exactly. But you
there
see,
is no provision in the Monetary Law Act, by the way.
Exactly. Absolutely none. But what this Shaman Singh, who's appeared in the island today, one of these sycophants, said, Mr. Clean, he said, no, if the Prime Minister, and he claims Sunil Handanetti said, if the Prime Minister's instructions is followed, we'd have dismissed. So what they're trying to say is what the Prime Minister was saying was, announce an auction for 10 billion and do 10 billion on auction.
Yeah.
I think that would have been unwise, but it wouldn't have been dishonest. Yeah. Now, if that is what the Prime Minister meant, and Arjuna Mahendran was secretive, then the Prime Minister should have sacked him immediately. But the fact that he continued to back him is very clear that he was complicit. Now, what the point I was making is that even in America, you know, money is given, in America it's to the corporates. In this country, you use the system to milk the people, because who pays this extra interest? And even the EPF, the scam is now, you know, Ranil tried to suggest that Nivad Cabral had done scams. EPF always got bonds at what they call direct placement, not private placement. It was safe. What has happened in the last 2 years is, without the EPF bidding for these inflated rates of interest, after the Aloysius crew got it at 12%, the EPF bought it and only got a much lesser percentage. So it really is a scam.
Yes,
and
you're quite right.
And Vijay Wardhan has done a superb study of this. It is outrageous, and it is really very sad that the Yapana people are not demanding the resignation of the Prime Minister, because it is very, very clear that his crookedness was at the expense of the people. Now, what happened in America...
I hope you understand that you're responsible for what you say.
I'm always responsible for what you say. Right. And if you guys don't actually speak a bit more clearly, you will not be doing your job properly.
We are always speaking without ambiguity and absolutely with absolute clarity. That is the hallmark of News First.
Good, thank you. Then why do you keep scolding me all the time?
I must remind you for legal purposes, Professor.
Okay.
But what I want to say...
But can I go back to Trump?
No, hold on a minute.
The banks. The banks in America were bailed out.
Yes.
And that meant the people had to pay. When they had been making excessive profits, they continue to make excessive profits, and against things like that, that the American people...
Yes, I must cut in here and read this thing out. It's from a viewer. It says that revelations by Dr. Rajita Senaratne during one of our programs, the Satana show, shows the kind of monies that were banked in Dubai. You're absolutely right. These monies didn't suddenly materialize out of the blue, or were not plucked from some mango tree or some coconut plantation. It is the people's money, and we must bear that in mind. You know, you go there and you pay your respects to people who've lost office and so on, and you cry and say, oh well, you know, what a pity he's out, and so on and so forth. But the bottom line is, why don't people, the public, realize that this is their money? It's banked in Dubai, wherever. We don't know. Because if we did, we would have said so on our shows. And there you are, Mr. Zuhail. How important is it, this achievement of Mr. Trump? He's triumphed over politicians with their theories and their whatever. I think he's spoken from his heart. Don't you think?
Certainly. I think he found the gap. As he said, as Professor Rajiva said, the people were getting fed up with these political institutions, you know, political parties. Both parties, they have tried and tested for several years, and both people were disgusted and dissatisfied. This person saw that opportunity, went into those people, touched their heart and said, we need a change. Change can be good or bad is another matter. What was, as I said, they rejected the existing institutions, both Democratic and Republican parties. They only look for an opportunity, alternative, right? That alternative has come, he found the opportunity. He, being a businessman, I'm sure that he did their
Yeah.
homework very well
Yeah.
and went into those people and touched their heart. If you look at the voting pattern also, as he said, you see urban areas, mainly New York and Washington DC and so on, went with Hillary Clinton,
Yeah.
whereas more rural areas, they all Trump swept the whole thing, you see. So it is that he found that gap, he was able to do that.
So this gap he found
Yes.
was something that he touched on the hearts and minds of the people, of, like you just said, of in the rural areas of
Rural,
America.
yeah.
Do you know, Mr. Ambassador Zuhail and Professor Vijay Singha, we do a program and it's called Gammadda. And now Gammadda program does reach out to the hearts and minds of people.
Yeah.
But there's a big difference. We actually deliver.
Yeah.
We deliver upon what we've undertaken, and that is
Yeah.
a program that has touched the hearts
Yeah.
and minds of people.
Yeah.
And it may not be too far off the day when the people in Sri Lanka too decide that they've had enough of politicians and may go for a complete and rank outsider.
Well, this is the first time I think in any of the democratic countries an outsider has come and swept the whole thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it has happened in India, Sri Lanka, or Malaysia, or any of these countries. It's politicians and politicians and politicians.
Yes, for a rank outsider to be elected.
Late. So
Yeah.
it's an experiment first. Okay, you can call it an experiment. It has been successful in the United States.
Yeah.
Whether that can be replicated here with all the social service, Gammadda program and similar things, that's what I said. Certain other NGO type of people who are set up and proved that they have done very well, you see, they can come forward. But will they be able to withstand this political thinking of our people? We are also very mature politically educated people, you see. So it's a great effort. If there is a possibility, when? Now you see one individual comes there, unlike in America, in the States, the president comes there, the Senate and the Congress. Luckily his party got some majority this time, both places, right? Now we need, if an individual comes out here, he has to go through the party nomination. If he goes independent person, how much people are going to respect? He has got the political machinery to support him is another matter we have to see. I mean, as you say, possibilities are there. Well, how much we can achieve within a short period of time, we have to wait and see. I doubt it. But as you said, both political parties are not delivered enough for the people, you see.
Do you think there's a connection, Ambassador Zuhail, when the announcement was made that Donald Trump had won the election, and some hours later we were treated to a message coming out of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that the government there, one state agency, had cancelled projects worth $267 billion. And it also said that they would be paying, the government of Saudi Arabia would be paying contractors, public, people who've taken state contracts, and that those companies would be paid because they'd been not unpaid for about a year.
Yeah.
Do you see a connection between that and the election of Mr. Trump?
Too early to comment on that. I don't know what really happened. This had been just suddenly they did that,
Yeah.
or it had a connection with the Trump's election. We don't know. As I told you, the Saudi Arabia
Yeah.
has got a large investment in America,
Yeah.
in bonds and investment. There are people like Prince Talal has got a very big personality.
Yeah.
He is supposed to be the 8th richest man in the world. Or
Indeed,
whatever.
indeed.
He has
Yeah.
so much of investment on his own.
Yeah.
In the United States.
Yeah.
I think he owns a good substantial amount of shares with Citibank, you see.
Yeah.
So like that, if they decide to withdraw, then that can have a major economic effect or impact on the American economy.
Yeah.
But I don't think American bureaucracy will allow that to happen, because the Trump, though he spoke in election, but this is an example. I don't know whether Saudis are immediately reacted to his election.
We don't know that.
We don't know still.
But the people in Sri Lanka, just as we are coming to the end,
Yes.
the people of Sri Lanka actually, when we voted for President Sirisena, it was actually probably the first time that we voted with no real party. I mean, he was for those purposes he was nominated by a party, but it wasn't any mainstream party. And so the people voted for Maithripala Sirisena. And that may just be a start of the real intention of the people of this country as we move ahead and as we get more and more fed up with these politicians.
I think that's a very good point. I think the tragedy now is that whereas the people wanted to change, poor president was saddled with the mixture as before because of our rather stupid constitutional system which marries presidencies with Westminster. Unlike Trump, who can make a fresh start, he was dependent on parliamentarians, most of whom were in any case tainted on one side or the other. So instead of having the change the people wanted, you actually had the mixture as before and the old faces back. And that is why both Vasantan Sennayak and I, when we advocated change, and we were the only two to do so openly before the election, we said if you have a presidential system, you must move to the model of presidential systems all over the world, which is an executive outside parliament but totally accountable. And that is what we need.
Yes, and you'll be coming, I think, we've been discussing in the diary, and we'll make an announcement soon, or Bandula will on his particular program as well. But as we look forward with a new vision, what do you think the real change will be? Will America become less sort of focused on international affairs? Will Mr. Trump want to concentrate, as he keeps saying, on making America great again, and in investing all that money in renewing the infrastructure within the U.S., and so will the U.S. be less interventionist in its foreign policy? What do you think?
That was his theme. That was his focus, you see. But whether America can do that is another matter. They have got that tentacle all over.
So they've gone beyond the point of no return, do you think, in that
Gone beyond the point of no return. If they do that, there can be major impact, major problems in all over the world and even in the States. Can they do business without China? China has so much of investment in America. So like that, they have so much. And if you withdraw all that, you see, and America will have a major problem.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Zoel, for being on Newsline. Thank you, Professor Vijay Singh. And thank you for having viewed Newsline. Have a great day ahead of you. Take care and God bless.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukut Ali.